Thanks, Kirk. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
I'm Bill Stack. Some people know me as Wayne, like my grandmother and so forth. But I worked for Baltimore City Department of Public Works for 30 years, and then I left there and went to work for a national nonprofit environmental organization called the Center for Watershed Protection. And while Kurt's talk appealed to a lot of the historians here. Hopefully my talk will appeal to a few science-minded people, but anyway, it won't be terribly complicated. So this is just a photograph of Loch Raven Reservoir. When I worked for Baltimore City, part of my responsibility was monitoring the source water, and my office was at the Ashburton Water Treatment Plant. And rather, when I gave up smoking, instead of going out and taking a smoke break, I would go to the archives and look through the old water records. So a lot of this history is based on some of these old archives, which I think have been incinerated since. We didn't have Ron Parks at the Ashburton Water Treatment Plant. Okay, well, the three reservoirs there are two reservoirs on the Gunpowder Basin. Loch Raven, you heard about. Pretty Boy feeds into Loch Raven and was built as a backup supply for periods of drought. Liberty Reservoir, you can see the relative drainage areas. The areas in gray are the areas that drain to each of the reservoirs. And you can see how much Liberty Reservoir drains the Tapsco supply. And that's kind of interesting because Liberty Reservoir has twice the capacity as Loch Raven, but half of the drainage area. So a lot of times, especially during droughts, you'll see that reservoir looks a lot drier, a lot less flow. Well, I'm not going to cover the history because I think Kurt did an excellent job. But one thing that Kurt mentioned, and there's a handout here that talks about the history of water quality from the granddaughter of, what was his name? Alfred Quick. And that is, water quality really shaped the history of our water supply. And the Baltimore area was known for typhoid. It had double the cases of typhoid fever at the turn of the century compared to New York City. And just some interesting facts about Loch Raven Reservoir. As I mentioned, the drainage area to Loch Raven is about 300 square miles. And the capacity is about 20 billion gallons. Now, Pretty Boy Reservoir, again, was built to fill up Loch Raven during periods of drought. It has the equivalent volume of about 20 billion gallons, but a much smaller drainage area, about 80 square miles. So during a drought, because they're using Pretty Boy Reservoir to fill up Loch Raven, a lot of times, and I think in the drought of record 2002, Pretty Boy Reservoir was almost drained down to the river, Loch Raven River, that flows through it. And this causes all sorts of problems with the people who are on wells that live nearby. Liberty Reservoir, again, is on the Tapsco Basin. It has double the capacity of Loch Raven. It has the equivalent capacity of Loch Raven plus Pretty Boy, but half of the drainage area. And because the upper part of Liberty almost looks like a river, there is Liberty Reservoir is a lot more resilient to pollution. And you can tell if you take water samples up in the headwaters, it's much more polluted. And by the time the water gets to the dam, it's a lot cleaner. It's a natural process of purification. And I don't think Kurt mentioned, but the Baltimore Metropolitan Water Supply is a metropolitan water supply. We provide water to, finished drinking water to Baltimore County, Anne Arundel, and Howard County. We provide raw water to Carroll County, where they have their own intake in Liberty. And as Kurt mentioned, we provide raw water to Harper County, where they treat it in Fullerton. And the water from Loch Raven Dam goes to the Montebello treatment plant and then up the big 96-inch tunnel to Fullerton, and that's how Harper County gets their water. I'm sorry, I'm having technical difficulty with this. Kurt, I think you worded battery.
I think it's that. I think it's that lower button. So it's this one here.
Sorry. Okay, I'm just going to, as you can see, this is a metropolitan water supply, and we provide, and there are all sorts of facilities throughout the region. There are water towers, and you can just see them if you drive out to Owings Mills or in Arundel County. You'll see water towers. You'll see finished drinking water reservoirs, such as the one in Towson. A lot of these reservoirs will have to be covered because of Drinking Water Act requirements. Still having problems with this. I'm just going to run through the treatment process. The Baltimore waters, despite having problems, it's still a pretty good water supply. The basic treatment process is we add alum to the water as it comes into the plants. The alum coagulates all the sediment and gunk. That settles. Then we filter it through sand, charcoal, and pea gravel. And essentially we add lime to adjust the pH and add chloride to keep her teeth strong. So I think that's enough of the treatment process. But there's also a connection to the wastewater plants, because the water we drink that goes down the sinks, of course, completes part of the water cycle. It goes to either the Backburger waste treatment plant or the Topscope waste treatment plant. And while we're talking about water cycle, this is, we have really altered the water cycle with the development of the watersheds, and I'll get into that. And I think we're probably altering the water cycle more with climate change, but there was a study done by the U.S. Geological Survey where they parsed out the amount of precipitation, and they figured out, well, the average precipitation we get per year is about 46 inches. Now, 13% of that is surface flow, and this is on an average year. About 26% of that goes into the ground. 61% of that is taken up by the trees. And from April to September, when we call when you have leaves on the trees, there's more water that's sustaining the trees than actually goes into the streams and into the reservoir. So during a drought year, you're in trouble, especially during the leaf-out period. So from October to March, like right now, we are in a net gain, so this is where we can build up and capture the rainfall for storage purposes. And it's interesting because during the drought of records in 2002, and Kurt remembers practices very well. I used to send my guys out to monitor the flow in all the streams. And they would go out in the morning, and there'd be plenty of flow. And then they would visit the same stream at 12 o'clock or around 1 o'clock, and there'd be no flow because all the water was taken up by the trees when they woke up during evapotranspiration. Well, I'm a history buff too. I'm not sure how many of you have read The History of Baltimore City and Baltimore County by J.T. Sharp, 1881. Has anyone here read that? It's fascinating, but what's fascinating, and we might be hearing about this a little, I'm not sure. What's fascinating, if you can read this gentleman is writing about the history of the landscape and the pollution from the landscape because of poor farming practices or forest practices. He talks about denuded landscapes and creek beds being filled with sediment. And this is in 1881. So it really kind of makes sense when you hear about and read about all the problems, the early problems with water supply. A lot of those problems were